May 23, 1992. Around 6 p.m., on the highway near the Sicilian city of Capaci, an explosion breaks the quiet of the afternoon. The aftermath: 5 deaths and 23 injuries. The target was Giovanni Falcone, an Italian judge and magistrate so determined to overthrow the power of the Sicilian Mafia to risk his life for it. Son of Arturo Falcone and Luisa Bentivegna, he was born in Palermo on May 18, 1939, in the same district as Paolo Borsellino and Tommaso Buscetta. He was extremely smart, as his grades proved the same point. He finished high school at the age of 18, and soon after moved to Livorno to attend the Naval Academy on the pretext that he loved the sea and wanted to do major in engineering. After only 4 months, in January 1958, he was assigned to the General Staff, but he realized that the military life was not for him. He returned to Palermo and enrolled in the Faculty of Law at the University of Palermo. Starting from the bottom, joining for the first time the Italian judiciary in 1964, Falcone soon got to the top of the Italian investigation regarding mafia cases. He dedicated his life to this battle, and from the beginning he was determined to eradicate the mafia from his hometown, Sicily. Right from the start, the reasoning behind the bombing were clear. The mafia, for the first time ever, was scared. At that time, he had stepped back from his role in Palermo's informal anti-mafia pool, a group of investigating magistrates who closely worked together and, most importantly, they assumed collective responsibility for carrying mafia prosecutions forward. Along with Falcone, the group included Paolo Borsellino, Giuseppe Di Lelli, and Leonardo Guarnotta. The incredibly brutal reaction of the Sicilian mafia can be traced back to the so-called Maxi trial against the Italian mafia. Falcone led the trial, which lasted roughly 1 year. Of the 475 defendants, 338 were convicted. A total of 2,665 years of prison sentences were shared out between the guilty, not included the life sentences handed to the 19 mafia bosses and killers. Tutorina and his clan, the Corleonesi, had declared war on Falcone, and he knew that his life was in danger. He had just put their boss in prison, and they weren't gonna let that slide. He had already received countless death threats, and he was under constant police protection, but Falcone refused to be intimidated. He knew that the fight against the mafia was not only his duty as a judge, but it was also his duty as a citizen. He was determined to bring down the organization, no matter the cost. On that fateful day, Falcone was traveling from his hometown of Palermo after landing at the Palermo airport. At that time, he was working in Rome with the Ministry of Justice, but every weekend he would take a flight and go back to his hometown, Palermo. There, he was due to spend the weekend with his wife and 3 children. He was accompanied by his wife, Francesca Morbillo, who was also a judge, and 3 police officers. The bombing had been orchestrated by Giovanni Brusca. His nickname was Uporco, the pig. He was close to Tutorina, and he personally picked him for the operation. Once it was decided to use explosives, 2 options were suggested to Brusca: placing explosives in some garbage cans placed near Falcone's home or in a pedestrian underpass crossing the highway. Both proposals were discarded, as for the former there was a risk of having too many innocent victims, while for the latter, Pietro Rampulla, an explosive expert, suggested finding a narrow place to place the charges so as to achieve a greater deflagration. After some research, a rainwater drainage tunnel was found, crossing the highway from one side to the other. In April 1992, Brusca carried out a test of the explosive in a small town in Sicily. After digging into the ground, he placed a burrow the same size as the one under the highway and filled the hole with cement. Inside the burrow, he inserted explosives and then placed an electric detonator there. The same transmitter and receiver that were later used in the Capaci bombing, procured by Pietro Rampulla, were used. The explosion that was generated, despite the fact that the charge was in a far smaller quantity than that used in the bombings, was quite powerful. The explosive, a 500 kilogram bomb made out of TNT, RDX, and ammonium nitrate, was positioned under the road in 13 different bins with the help of a skateboard. A remote control for airplane models controlled the destination. Brusca also put a fridge and some red paint marks along the highway to notify him when to press the button. The expected speed for Falcone's car and his protection was 130 km per hour, and at those speeds the signal was key for a correct destination, as with just 1 second of delay the target could have been missed by more than 30 meters. The outpost they chose to monitor the road from was on top of a small hill, and Brusca hid in a small shed of the local water company. He even cut the branches that were limiting his view to get a clearer sight of the road. On May 23rd afternoon, Rina's men warned by telephone Brusca that the Fiat Croma cars had left and turned onto the highway in the direction of the Punta Raisi airport to pick up Falcone. One of the killers even moved with his car to a road parallel to the lane of the A29 highway and followed the armored group of cars, remaining in telephone contact with Brusca, still outpost on the knoll above the highway. At the sight of the motorcade full of armored cars, Brusca had a moment of hesitation. Having noticed the escort car slowing down as far as he could see, Giuseppe Costanza, a judicial driver who was in the car with Falcone and his wife, was reminding him that he should give him back his car keys, so Falcone removed them and tried to give them to him, but the driver asked him to reinsert them to avoid the risk of an accident. After this slowdown, Brusca activated the radio control that caused the explosion. The first armored car in the motorcade, the brown Croma, was hit head-on by the explosion and jolted off the road surface into an olive grove several dozen meters away, killing officers Antonio Montinaro, Vito Schifani, and Rocco Di Cillo on impact. The second car, the white Croma, driven by Falcone, crashed into the wall of asphalt and debris suddenly raised by the blast, violently projecting the judge and his wife, who were not wearing seatbelts, against the windshield. Officers Paolo Capuzza, Gaspare Cervello, and Angelo Corbo, who were traveling in the third car, were wounded but alive. After a few moments of shock, they managed to open the car doors, and once they got out, they lined up to protect the white Croma, fearing that the gunmen would arrive on the scene to deliver the coup de grace. Instead, several inhabitants of the surrounding areas arrived on the scene, intending to render first aid. Judge Falcone and Francesca Morvillo were still alive and conscious, but they were in a serious condition. Thanks to the help of the inhabitants, it was possible to pull the judge's wife out of the window. Instead, to free Falcone from the crumpled metal sheets, it was necessary to wait for the arrival of the fire department. Giovanni Falcone and Francesca Morvillo died in the hospital in the evening of the same day from severe internal bleeding. Falcone died at 7:05 p.m. in Paolo Borsellino's arms, and his wife died shortly after. The killing of Giovanni Falcone was a tragic event that shook Italy to its core. It was an attack on the very foundations of Italian democracy and a reminder of the power of the organized crime. However, it was also a turning point in the fight against the Mafia. Falcone's legacy is one of bravery, determination, and a commitment to justice. His work has inspired a new generation of Italians to continue the fight against organized crime and to ensure that the Mafia never again holds sway over Italian society.